heating and air conditioning, one may have heard the term or terminology pulling a vacuum. One may have heard the heating and air conditioning technicians, etc., to refer to the term when they do a new install or recover refrigerant from the heating and air conditioning. And then at some point they may have heard of a vacuum. This term may sound very abstruse, but in reality it's very simple. We have, first off, we have a 110. Most for residential would be a 110 with a ground, a hot, and a neutral, and a ground. Simply plug that in. Okay, we have the port here. We would take this off, and this is where you would see the air or whatever non-condensables come out of. So just be sure to take the cap off. Okay, on this particular side here, we see the ports. What we do on these is hook it up. Now, if you've got a larger port and if you're able to remove the Schrader valve, or I'm not sure if Schrader valve is the correct terminology, or the valve core for the heating and air, and have a larger one, you may be able to pull a vacuum quicker. So, question, breaking the complex down into the simple. One may say, well, what is a vacuum? This just sounds weird. In a sense of the word, it does. So let's break it into household terminology, and we'll use an analogy. And this is simply an analogy, simply for an example. This is not a real world situation. Think of a vacuum cleaner for your house. You put the vacuum cleaner in and you move it around the floor and you begin to suck things up. So I'm thinking this would be a negative vacuum. Now, an air compressor, if we blew air out, this would blow out in the other direction. But this is a vacuum cleaner would pull the air out. So essentially, one has these copper lines that look like this, the line set, and they may have air, water, etc., non-condensables, meaning are not able to condense. So one needs to pull a vacuum down below, say, 500 microns or below. So you'll need a tool like this. Simply hook this up, plug this up, get your gauges, hook your gauges up to whichever one fits. Now, if you can get a larger hose, that would even be better, and remove the valve core. On the side over here is an on and off button. You just click the on and off button. Then you read your gauges, and your gauges, if you have the old manifold gauges, you may see it suck down to a certain point. If you see the digital gauges, or sometimes people use what they call a micron gauge, which is just a small gauge, and when it gets down to 500 microns, one may let it sit. Some people may let it sit to see if it's going to hold the vacuum, or if it doesn't, if everything's kind of sealed tightly from the brazing or wherever was broken and the pipe was connected, whether that be the brazing or whatnot. So just think of this little pump. We're actually pulling air out of the system. And when we say the system, this would be the line set. This would be the high pressure line. The bigger one with the insulation would be the low pressure line. So what we're doing is essentially removing all of this. And so just think of this like here. This would be kind of an analogy. Think of this as putting a vacuum cleaner on here and going, and we suck all this stuff out. So if there's air and water, we're sucking all the air and water out of this pipe so that the refrigerant can actually work better. So this would pull it down, and one normally needs to pull it down to 500 microns. So now when one hears the term or the terminology, I need to pull a vacuum, this would be, there are many different manufacturers of vacuum pumps, and I'm not here to endorse any one over the other. I'm sure many of them are great, and they all essentially kind kind of have the same goal in mind, in my opinion, maybe, and perhaps I'm wrong, but my opinion is the goal is to pull a vacuum. So when you're actually saying, when you're sucking the air out, I'm thinking this may be a negative vacuum. So you're pulling it, and your gauges, when one sees the gauges, so you need help from a motor. And this pump here, so just kind of think along the lines of this pump here is a vacuum pump, and this pump will help suck it out, just like if you took your vacuum cleaner and you put it on the hose and you go and you start pulling stuff up through the ground. Well, this has this, and this will be connected. So instead of your vacuum hose, your gauges would be hooked onto one of these, and then you would start to pull use this motor, and this motor in this vacuum pump would pull it down and pull any water, non-condensables, say air, water, etc. And then once you pull it down to, say, 500 microns or better, and then some people let it hold to see if it holds, because if it doesn't hold, then you may have a leak somewhere and you may need to address that issue. But so when one technician may use the term, well, we've got to vacuum the system. And so once a system's been broken, it needs to be if the line set, which would be this copper line, this would be the high pressure, and the low pressure. If either of them was broken and sweated back in, not sweated back in, brazed back in, then at this point you would need to pull anything out of here, because the refrigerant needs the simple refrigerant to be able to effectively work. So if you leave non-condensables in here, it's not going to be able to, the refrigerant's not going to be able to work to optimum pressure. So one would need a pump, a vacuum pump like this to pull it. Then you would need either the gauges or a micron gauge. A micron gauge, one might be able to hold in their hand. It's smaller. I don't have one around. I would like to have one, but the gauges, just once you start to pull it here, then you start to pull the vacuum down, and then you'll start to see a little bit of kind of like smoke or something come out of this. It's coming out of this, it's drawing it out and just discharging it. And it's not necessarily putting refrigerant in the air. It's simply just putting water or non-condensables or whatever, and removing them from here and then getting rid of them. So then once you get this, once you have your vacuum to, say, 500 microns or below, and it sits, and you're able to know that the vacuum is maintaining the adequate microns, say 500 microns or below, plus or minus in residential sometimes, then at this point one can turn the vacuum pump off, and then get ready to release your refrigerant from the system into, so it goes through your line set. And a line set is nothing but a fancy name of just two copper lines. And the smaller line would be, I think, the high pressure line. The larger line with the insulation would be the low pressure line. So this is what a vacuum pump is. So if just kind of think of it, next time you're vacuuming your house, just kind of think of that as a vacuum, and that would be, you would just doing this, sucking it up. So just think of this as you're just, instead of sucking all the trash off the floor, you're sucking the unwanted stuff out of here and getting rid of it, so that once the refrigerant's in here, the refrigerant can work to optimum capacity. Vacuum pump for heating and air conditioning. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.